Good afternoon. I call to order this emergency meeting of the Winston-Salem City Council and ask the City Secretary to call the roll, please.
Councilmember Larson.
Present.
Councilmember Clark. Councilmember Bessie.
Here.
Councilmember Montgomery.
Here.
Mayor Pro Tem Burke.
Here.
Councilmember Adams.
Here.
Councilmember McIntosh.
Here.
Councilmember Taylor.
Present.
Thank you very much. And City Council, thank you all for coming together. I can't recall the last time we've had an emergency meeting together, but yesterday on the advice of our staff, I did sign a declaration of a state of emergency here for Winston-Salem. Chairman of the County Commissioners, Dave Plyler, signed a similar one for Forsyth County. The city code does provide that I have that authority to do that, but only for a 24-hour period, and which is good advice, and that the City Council has to ratify that. So the purpose of today's meeting is to ask you to consider ratifying that declaration of a state of emergency. We did it for a number of reasons, a number of which to bring attention to the whole issue to our citizens, to give us some authority should we need it. Things do get more difficult. We can prohibit certain activities. We can prohibit the transfer of certain materials throughout the city and things of that nature. But primarily, and one of the reasons, of course, it does set us up for applying for any emergency money from FEMA or other federal agencies if we need it there. I thought with City Council's permission, I might just ask our Assistant City Manager, Mr. DeCune, to make a couple brief comments about this as well. And we have August Vernon, our head of our emergency management here, as well as other of our public safety officials. Damon?
Yes, sir. Thank you, Mr. Mayor, Mayor Pro Tem, members of the City Council. I recently sent all of you an email with sort of an update on what city staff has been doing to prepare for this event. And I'll read a little bit of that to you right now. In that message, I also committed to provide updates to you daily, minimum of 2 times a day, before noon in the morning and around 6 p.m. in the evening, to keep you all informed. So all departments as of today have enacted staffing protocols to allow for enough personnel to provide service to the citizens throughout the event and then post-event. CityLinks began 24-hour staffing. The Winston-Salem Fire Department has increased staffing, and the chief can speak to that. DOT, utilities, and operations have all established on-call and regular staffing throughout the event, and the snow room will be open tomorrow. So while we're not having snow, the same protocol will apply. All necessary equipment has been serviced. Our fleet services have been extremely busy making sure that all equipment is up and running and in adequate condition to support. All city fuel tanks have been fueled, topped off. Utilities, all backup emergency power generation has been tested. All that has been topped off, and we do have priority refueling should those pieces of infrastructure be needed. All emergency operations plans are in effect, including ours with the city-county emergency operations plan is in effect. And we've been actively advising the public on safety issues such as don't run a generator in the home, don't bring your gas grill inside, have an emergency plan, have an emergency kit, stay tuned to the news, social media, all those sorts of outlets for updates and information. And with that, I'll ask Mr. August Vernon, your Emergency Management Director, to come up and share what emergency management is doing, and city staff will be happy to answer any questions you may have.
Mr. Vernon?
Good afternoon, Mayor, Mayor Pro Tem, and council members.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
I hate that the first time I'm in front of this body is for a state of emergency, but here we are, and I'll try to inform you the best way I can. There's obviously a lot of moving parts and pieces, and I leave here and go to another meeting and followed by multiple conference calls. So what I thought I would do is basically put things into 4 different buckets, main areas, to tell you what's happening and what we've been doing, what we're doing now, and what we may have to do. So the first key component for the Office of Emergency Management, with the help of a lot of the agencies that you see in here now, is since this weekend we've been coordinating a lot of coordination meetings, and that's just not a meeting for the sake of a meeting. That's a meeting where we have now met with probably 60 different city, county, state, local, nonprofit, non-governmental organizations to kind of prepare our response to the hurricane. And we've been doing that especially every single day, with the largest meeting was yesterday with almost 60-something members. Also, we are in daily communications with the State Division of Emergency Management, and that's very normal for any type of event. Once the governor declared a state of emergency, that activates state emergency management, so we were hearing from them at least once or twice a day now. And we're also in daily communications with the National Weather Service. And their forecast about 2 hours ago has changed again. So what I've been saying, out of 6 days of hurricane tracking, we've now had 6 different tracks. So you'll hear me say a lot of I don't know and we're not sure and we're uncertain, and we're still uncertain. Usually hurricanes are pretty straight, narrow. You have a good idea of what's going to happen, and our forecast is changing locally literally every 4 hours. So we're still planning for worst case scenarios. Second part that's important is we're very fortunate to have a lot of resources here in Winston-Salem, Forsyth County, and those resources are prepared to deploy as they should be, and that's everything from water rescue to health and human services, sheltering operations, mass feeding, incident management teams, which will deploy to the impacted counties and help them in their emergency operations centers, even to fire engines and everything in between. Right now, we're trying to keep a lot of those resources here, and Chief Mayo can speak more about that. Some have deployed, but the majority we're still trying to keep here. Probably a third bucket that has sort of become an essential item for us that we did not know about 3 days ago was the sheltering operation at the LJVM Coliseum. That's unusual for us. There is a statewide coastal evacuation plan that normally we are not part of that written plan, because they usually stopped about Raleigh, Burlington. When they evacuate people from the coast, they've used that plan before, but because Raleigh is going to be seriously impacted, they've moved it further out west, and we were able to offer that assistance because the Coliseum is available for 10 days. So we've got it for 10 days, and this was, I did talk to some of the evacuees this morning, and they obviously, some of them it took 2 days to get here, and they don't have anything except the clothes on their back. So we were glad to be able to try to help them out. We've been told to prepare for anywhere from 500 to 1,000 evacuees. When I was there was about 40. That could change at any time. We really don't know what's going to happen. Apparently traffic is really bad in the eastern part of the state. So we do have the sheltering operations. Again, the departments in here and a lot of others are also helping with that. That is a state operation that between the city, Wake Forest University, and our partners that we're able to try to help them. Everyone asks, there is an animal shelter, and right now there was one cat in it. And I can tell you that cat was the most well-protected cat probably in North Carolina. But as I mentioned this morning, what they've learned over the years is one of the main reasons people will not evacuate from their houses is because of their pets. If my pet can't go with me, then I'm not going to leave. And so over the years, it used to be 10, 15 years ago, you didn't allow pets in, and that made sense. But now the animal sheltering considered a big part of that. So we do have the Piedmont Emergency Animal Response Team, the Humane Society was there, there were several entities there. But those same groups are also preparing to deploy. So right now we're kind of playing a chess game with all these resources. Probably the fourth big bucket is public information. And we've been doing that through a variety of ways, from doing these several news conferences, social media. I am not a social media person. I am not on Facebook. Some reporters have asked me, and I'm like, I don't even really know what that is. So, but we do have several individuals. In fact, there's some at the EOC now who are social media experts, and all they're doing is putting out social media information. And we're using the normal means of mass messaging. Ed McNeil and his team have done an excellent job of helping us with that. So, and another item I just want to throw out, because I've also been asked several times about this, is how can people help? And I just found out there is a website through the governor's office that is a legitimate, real website that is volunteernc.org. We've already got that questions from a lot of people. Well, I want to help and do something. Can I send my old clothes to the coast, which is not a good idea. They will certainly need funding to help with what's getting ready to happen. So that's a very quick snapshot of sort of those 4 buckets of where we're at right now in the response. I'm willing to take questions.
Yeah, any questions of our staff? Councilmember Burke?
I've been thinking about the homeless in Winston-Salem.
Yes.
How have we made them aware so that I don't have to hang on the corners or living in vacant houses or cars?
So I know I have heard from several individuals who work with that population that they told me, I think there's 380 beds for the homeless. A lot of them are full. That the sheltering operations are for all, I heard some misunderstanding, it's only for evacuees. That if we need those resources here, that is open to any citizen. That they don't check IDs to see if you live at the coast. So the shelter is there for whoever may need it. And that was part of our discussion to take on this large operation that requires a lot of resources, that we would also be able to use that sheltering operation for anyone here that may need it.
Mr. Mayor, don't,
Yes, ma'am.
and Council, then we need to let it be known because some of them don't know it. And you talked about the communication with Mr. McNeil. Is that something he will be putting emphasis on?
I will certainly make sure, Mayor Pro Tem.
All right,
Yes.
thank you.
Good. Councilmember Montgomery?
Question. One of the questions I have is just in terms, you mentioned around the communication components. If something changes in the midst of this, from emergency notifications, particularly push notifications that we may get in a severe weather event of something of that nature, are those capabilities that are local that would be utilized in some instance?
Yes, those same resources I talked about, we can also start pushing out emergency messages to do that. And usually the media is a good partner in that on wanting to push those information out. I think a lot of the next, if conditions deteriorate, the National Weather Service will start issuing those watches and warnings that will set off a lot of these systems.
And Mr. Mayor, if I can make a comment as well in reference to one of the shelter operations on the homeless side. As a provider, providers gathered on, today is Thursday, on Tuesday, gathered together to also put together from the CLC standpoint a plan of operation and action on how the shelters in the community would engage to expand beds that are currently located within shelters, to expand capacity, as well as the overflow shelter that normally only goes into operation in December has already designated a specific location that, if necessary, for homeless individuals that may not be able to get into other shelters, as well as being able to access the Coliseum, that is already in place as well. And so there communication that is happening amongst shelter providers to ensure that if anyone comes to any shelter seeking shelter from homeless standpoint, that we're in communication to ensure that there's always a place for them to go during this time.
Good, thank you. And I believe there are 2 good websites we might direct folks to, readynorthcarolina.org and then readyforsyth.org.
Ready for Sight, yes, sir.
And the Ready for Sight would have a little more localized information. I can't remember, do we have the 24 low-lying areas on that as yet? Do you know?
I do not know. There's other people working on other.
It says it is. Okay.
Okay.
Good. All right, we'll be good. Well, good. Thank you all very much. And then we'll have obviously our other public safety folks here as well. But and I want to recognize Senator Paul Lowe is here. Thank you, Senator, for joining us today as well. Send us some money.
He said yes.
I'd like to recognize our chairman of our Public Safety Committee, if he is prepared maybe for a motion.
Mayor, members of the council, we have heard from many national, state, and local sources indicating the need to ratify the mayor's declaration. We've also heard from Assistant City Manager DeCane and from our own Emergency Management Director, Mr. Vernon, about the need to ratify this declaration. So, therefore, I move that we ratify the mayor's declaration of a state of emergency within the corporate limits of the city of Winston-Salem at this time.
Second.
Discussion? Councilman Bessie?
Yeah, this would be a good point while people are still watching to make some notes about things that we should be aware of. And this would be for the folks who are not evacuating to another location. There are several things to remember about a storm, even if it continues to track south and doesn't hit us with the kinds of winds that it might have and that it's hitting some areas with. And that is, one is the particular foremost danger is flooding. And it can't be said too many times, quite frankly. Be aware of flooded areas, flood-prone areas that you might be driving through or to if you have to go out, and do not drive into standing water. You may think you know that street. You may think that it's going to be shallow, but you don't know what's underneath the water. And you don't know how fast it may be moving. If we have 5 to 10 inches of rain, what's normally a calm creek running through a neighborhood could have a current strong enough to, be a foot deep in that low-lying spot, float your car up off the road surface, and carry it over upside down into the creek. So, the refrain that you hear, the catchphrase is "Don't drown, turn around." We'll try to get barriers out, with equipment that's been placed around the city as quickly as possible, so that folks are warned off by that. Don't try to drive around the barriers. But if you happen to be the first person on a newly flooded area and it doesn't have a barrier, don't test it. Call that in. Second, on a more mundane basis, you probably know that we did have the sanitation crews out making the regularly scheduled collections today. Please do bring those bins in tonight. Don't let them sit out overnight just in case the winds do pick up significantly, because they'll then be flying out in the street creating hazards for you and your neighbors, and that's a problem. The last time I asked, and Mr. DeCane can tell us if this has been changed, it looked like conditions would permit sanitation collections tomorrow, but if that changes, don't put the bins out and keep an eye on it. Has that changed, Mr. DeCane?
There's been no change yet, sir, but we'll make the call before the end of the day.
All right. So again, though, if you do put the bins out in the morning, please do bring them back in as soon as possible, rather than leave them out as some folks might do on a recurring basis. And then finally, the third thing, the other big danger in an event of this nature for an inland area like ours is an unusually high number of extended outages and associated with down power lines. Normally in a thunderstorm that hits either a local area or even along just a line of storms coming through, you're going to be able to anticipate a certain reasonable period of quick response by Duke Energy locally. Here, the complication is that it's not just along a line of squalls. It's around 2 states that you're going to be seeing extended outages. So the crews and equipment that might normally come in fairly rapidly locally are entirely likely to face longer delays. They've had to restage some of the equipment that might normally be in this area a little further east, and it's going to take a while. In the meantime, stay away from those down trees because they may have knocked a power line down. It may still be energized. They might not have gotten to it yet. And that is why you have, in some of these situations, what seems like a longer than you'd expect delay in restoring power to a place, because if it has knocked down, if a tree, weakened by the flooding, its root situation, weakened by saturated ground, has toppled over, taken down a pole or taken down lines, there are 3 steps that need to occur before that the power from that damage can be restored. The first is that Duke Energy crew has to get there and be sure that the lines are de-energized. They're not powered up. They're not an electrocution threat. Then either their crew or city crew gets there to take the tree off the road. And if the crews are out on multiple other calls, that's going to take a while. Then Duke Power comes in, and Duke Energy, excuse me, and repairs the equipment and gets the power back up. So if we have widespread outages in the area from flooding and trees coming down, it's likely to take longer than usual to get them back up. So if you've got an elderly or ill or special needs family member or neighbor, check on them, be sure that there's a plan B for an extended outage where they don't have power to their house, and help them get to help. I know that I have elderly parents there in Hickory. I can't be here and there. I've got family in both places at the same time. I checked in with one of their neighbors who fortunately is an emergency room physician, and his wife is an emergency room nurse, and they are kindly going to check up on them in case there's a communications gap problem. So, you know, when you have a neighbor with a similar situation, please help the community take care. That's all I wanted to mention.
Thank you, Councilmember. Yeah, Councilmember Burke and then Councilmember McIntosh.
I was going to say, it was stated that we have our chief of fire. We also have our chief of police here as well. I want someone to explain to me the generators that these people are buying by the, you should see how they're just in those stores. And that's been one thing caused a lot of problems. So explain the generator, how they use them, and what they should be careful about.
Yes, Mayor Pro Tem, I'd be happy to do so. So with the threat that Councilmember Bessie was just talking about with extended power outages, being creatures of convenience, we like to have our refrigerators running and our television and Wi-Fi and all those other great things. So a lot of people who have no experience with said devices may go out and purchase those. There's a couple of hazards associated with the generator. The first is, as they run, they're gas powered, they can create carbon monoxide. So if you don't have it in a well-ventilated area outside of the home, you could fall victim to carbon monoxide poisoning. The other is when it comes time to refuel the generator, you need to shut the generator off and let it cool before you fill it, or any gas that spills on the side or anything like that could cause a fire or a hazard as well. And lastly, if the home is not wired appropriately to receive that and you plug it into your electric panel without taking proper precautions, you can backfeed the grid, and then when power is restored, that could cause a major issue at the home as well. So those are the hazards associated with portable generators at the home.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember McIntosh?
There's an app for that, readync.org for your smartphone. It's got very good resources. Readync.org. Download it to your phone.
Yep, thank you. All right, we do have a motion and a second to approve the resolution ratifying the mayor's declaration of a state of emergency. And if we're ready, all in favor of the motion, please indicate by voting yes. Anyone opposed, vote no. Motion passes unanimously. Thank you so much. I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor of the motion to adjourn, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, no. Thank you.